All right, let's talk Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Massive victory, rivalry game. It's one of those great rivalries in college football. Of course, that's not discussed as much as it should be. Fighting Irish got it done. 10-point victory, 34-24 over USC. This was a big win for Notre Dame, but for a lot of reasons why I don't think people are focusing on. But we'll dive into why it's so big and what it means going forward for the Fighting Irish. But first, I'm Nick. That is Andrew, and this is Saturday Morning Inspection. So the reality is in college football and football in general, there's going to be some games where everything goes right? You play great. The other team maybe plays poorly. The bounces go your way. You have some career games from a bunch of different guys, right? Your quarterback can't miss, right? You throw a pick six that goes back because of a penalty, or you block a punt, and it's just your day. Everything is crisp and clean. Everything works like it did in practice. You're just like, hey, we're clicking on all cylinders. Sometimes you have that game against good teams. Sometimes you have that game against bad teams. Everyone used to, kind of has a game or two like that per season. You get a big win. Everyone feels good. But that wasn't what it was against USC, was it, for Notre Dame? It was ugly. CJ Carr threw one of the worst interceptions I've ever seen in the red zone, right? It was not sort of this pristine performance, right? There was a lot of yikes. The offense was inconsistent at best, right? The rushing game saved the day, came out of nowhere with big plays. I don't want to say came out of nowhere because it's a good team, but in terms of being that dominant, a little bit of a surprise. I think people saw what USC did against Michigan in some respects and thought, okay, they'd have a pretty good game plan against Notre Dame. And it turns out Notre Dame was more physical. But this was the Fighting Irish squad that was sloppy, made a lot of mistakes. Quarterback CJ Carr, 2 or 3 steps forward the past few weeks, pretty big step back. But guess what, guys? They won. They won by double digits against a quality opponent, and that's what matters. And that's why Notre Dame is a serious force right now. We talked about it earlier this week. If they can get past USC, they're a contender to run the table. And I'm not talking about run the table the regular season, but run the table in the postseason. Let's pull up the numbers here to just dive deeper into what we're talking about. Let's pull up the team stats first. Let's look at the yardage, right, in first down. So total yards, Notre Dame with the slight edge, 442 to 396. First downs, 23 of 23 right there, so pretty even. But look at third downs. USC 6 of 14 of third down. That's pretty good. A little, not great, but, acceptable. Notre Dame, 3 of 11 on third down. Sloppy. Right. We talk about the turnovers, terrible interception. The defense made some plays. But if you look at the penalties there, sloppiness, 8 for 96 for Notre Dame, only 1 for USC. Very sloppy, uncharacteristic performance from the Fighting Irish. A lot of mistakes, a lot of just, bad execution. Right. Listen, sometimes you turn the football over because the DB makes a great play, or the defensive end just, is so fast that he goes around the left tackle and blindside rushes, sack fumble the quarterback. Or, you muff a punt because the punt is such a fluky, weird punt. It's a windy day and the returner is running all over the place and it bounces off his hands, right? Turnovers can happen in a lot of weird ways. That wasn't the case here for Notre Dame, right? That interception by CJ Carr was a terrible decision. That was poor execution. 3 of 11 on third down, 8 penalties for 96 yards. All of those things right there. If you just took away USC's numbers and you just showed me Notre Dame's numbers, and I understand the rushing looks pretty crazy and they did absolutely dominate running the football, I would sit there and say, that's tough. You can't have that kind of sloppy execution. But they found a way to win and win convincingly because of the running game, because the defense came up with some big plays. They found a way to get it done. And I think, to me, special teams as well, give credit where credit is due. They found a way to get it done, guys. And that, again, speaks to the dangerous nature of Notre Dame. Because if CJ Carr is wheeling and dealing, like I talked about it, early on a minute ago, if things are crisp and clean, they can roll over you like a machine. They can, because they're balanced. They've got talent, defense rolling, special teams rolling, CJ Carr crisp. Boy, oh boy, are they a machine. But you got a young quarterback. It's not going to be crisp sometimes. There's going to be some bad days. And it was kind of that kind of day against USC, if we're being totally honest. But they still won. They still found a way to overcome the adversity and get it done. A lot of that is the running game and obviously big guys stepping up. In fact, let's go ahead and look at the individual numbers, if you don't mind, Miles, to throw up on the screen. We'll go with the rushing because obviously it's a story of the day with Jeremiah Love having, an all-time day, 24 for 228 in the score. Of course, that long 63-yarder was massive. Price also had a big day, of course, with the 32-yard top of the list there. But receiving 16 of 26 for a $136 and a pick. That's losing football. That's not crisp. Speaks to 3 of 11 on third down, right? The penalties. If you look at their second leading receiver, it's Jeremiah Love with 5 catches. I mean, it was not a passing day to be remembered at all from Notre Dame. Yet they won against a really good football team, playing their best football of the season. USC just beat a really good Michigan team. A lot of momentum, a lot of energy with the Trojans. We talked about earlier this week. USC Trojans playing good football. They're a force. Lincoln Riley's doing a lot of good things. And it was an off day for this passing offense, to put it mildly. The penalties, the sloppiness, and still they got it done. The Notre Dame Fighting Irish came into the season kind of like last season, where, listen, we know there are going to be games they could win with their running game and special teams and some clutch defensive plays. The real question is they can't do that over the entire season. They're going to need CJ Carr to step up. And the reality is CJ Carr had a rough day. But the fact of the matter is, push comes to shove, they can still rely on the running game and special teams when the moments get dark. And I think that's why this Fighting Irish team is really good and a lot better than people think, if I'm being totally honest. Because CJ Carr, if he's hot, this team, you can't stop this team. Right now, they just beat one of the best teams in the country at home. Obviously, that plays a big role. But they did it with their quarterback having a disaster game. In 2025, this shouldn't happen, right? You play a good team, your quarterback is an off day, you lose. That's just how it works in college football. Ask Miami, by the way. They lost to Louisville. Louisville's a good football team. Miami played them at home. Their quarterback had an off day. How'd that go for the Hurricanes, right? It's just how it works in college football. Look at Texas. Texas is a stacked team across the board. Their quarterback, Arch Manning, rough season, very beatable. Just survived against Kentucky, lost against a bad Florida team a few weeks ago. The reality is, no matter how stacked you are, no matter how good you are, if your quarterback has an off day against a good team, you lose. That's just a fact. The exception is Notre Dame. And that's why they're dangerous. That's why they're a serious threat to win the whole darn thing. Because even on a terrible day for their offensive passing attack, even when their quarterback has a disaster kind of day with some really bad plays, they still find a way to win and win by double digits. And that, to me, makes them one of the biggest threats, in all of college football. I know Ohio State gets the news. Oregon's really good. Indiana's a fun team. The SEC's got a bunch of guys. But I tell you what, when you look at this team out of South Bend and the way they were playing, the way they can play, makes them, in my opinion, the favorite to surprise a lot of people. I know it's going to sound crazy, but outside of Ohio State and Oregon, who in my opinion are right now the two best teams, Notre Dame is creeping up that list. 2 losses to two really good teams by a total of 4 points since they played, getting better and better. I tell you what, guys, this team out of South Bend, Indiana, they've proven themselves to be one of the top forces in college football. All right, Miles, I'm curious what your thoughts are on all of this. But first, Notre Dame fans, in the comment section below, obviously Jeremiah Love, if you're going to give an MVP, it begins and ends with him. But I'm going to make you guys think outside the box here. Give me a defensive MVP. Let's focus on the defensive side of the football. Obviously, some key takeaways and some key stops to allow Notre Dame to come up with a victory. Give us your defensive MVP for this big victory. Put them in the comment section below. But Miles, I will toss it over to you now. What are your thoughts on all things Notre Dame?
Yeah, Nick, I think there's 3 crucial things here that I want to cover in this game as far as what it means for Notre Dame and how good of a job they did going forward. I think the first part is consistency, and that's not just with this game. I think the last, I'd say 5-6 games since week 4 against Purdue, this is a team that came out of the blocks early. 2 really tough games against Miami, Texas A&M. Those were 1-score games, 1-point game in the Texas A&M case. This is a team that has come out and been super consistent. They've graded out 80 plus every single game since the Purdue game. A really good Notre Dame team. And even like you said, bad quarterback play, bad day for the quarterback position, receiving position for this team, still managed to grade in the 80s because the other parts of this team help pull it forward. We're seeing this is a team that, like you said, quarterback has a bad day. Let's say USC's quarterback had a bad day. There's no way they're even coming close to beating Notre Dame. Notre Dame's quarterback has a bad day. This is a good enough team all around the board to be able to pull them back into the game and keep things going. And I say pull them back in the game, they were neck and neck the whole time and end up just pulling away. This is a team that didn't have to fight its way back in. Even though they had bad quarterback play, they were still able to compete with them the entire time. That brings me to the second point is this is a team in USC who they've scored a lot of points this year. This is a team that has a lot of firepower. And if you're able to boat race them with your rushing attack, I think that's really important. I think this is a Notre Dame team who has a very solid rushing attack here and looks really, really great going forward as far as what they're able to bring to the table in the rushing game. CJ Carr has showed when, like you said, when he's on, unbeatable team. But the rushing attack of this Notre Dame team gives them a little leeway. This is CJ Carr does not have to carry this team on his back because of the great rushing attack of this team. And let's see just exactly how good it was last week. USC goes, they beat Michigan Wolverines. Michigan, a top 20 team in the country in the rushing department, actually number 18. What do? They hold Michigan to 100 yards. total for the whole team. So this is a Notre Dame team that comes in, be able to rush for 300 yards on this defense. I think that's pretty good. I think it was a great showing for the Fighting Irish to say, hey, we can do it and we can do it in a dominating fashion. You think you're good at stopping the run? Well, here's the joke. You're not. We're better at running the ball than you are at stopping the run. So I think this was a really, really good job by Notre Dame. And then just finally, this was the pinnacle of this season. This was the game for Notre Dame. First two losses at the beginning of the season, very tough. If they wanted any chance of making the college football playoff throughout the rest of the season this year, since the Texas A&M game, this was the game they had to win. This is the last ranked opponent they're probably going to play. This was the big game for them. Must win. You had to dominate too and show that you did it, and they did just that. So I think the rest of the season, there's going to be tough opponents, maybe frisky opponents if you want to put it in those terms, but this was the big one they had to win. They go out, they get the job done in a dominating fashion. So I think Notre Dame has accomplished some really big stuff. I think they've cemented themselves as at least a strong consideration for the college football playoff if they're able to win out for the rest of the season. I think this Notre Dame team looks very dangerous. And I think people are going to be worried if they draw this team come college football playoff time. This is not a team that you want to come up against because not only can they beat you through the air, not only can they beat you on the ground, but the defense can come up and do some great things as well. I think this Notre Dame team is looking very dangerous.
And just one final point to end on here. I think when you looked at Notre Dame last year, right, they were sort of on their magical run. They were running the football, clutch defensive plays, and special teams, right? That was sort of what carried them late in the season and in the postseason. A lot of people said, well, that just isn't sustainable, right? It's just sort of a, one-off. And what we saw against USC and what we've seen at different times this season is that certainly is sustainable because that's how Notre Dame built their program, right? They didn't build it to, play a certain style. And it just so happened last year the things just fell into their lap, right? They had a lot of injuries last year. They were decimated and found ways to win. This is a program that's built on the defense forcing takeaways and coming up with big clutch stops, on the special teams making big plays, ability to run the football as well. So what we saw yesterday from Notre Dame wasn't just some anonymous game. It was just sort of what they do. It's how they want to play. One of the reasons we haven't seen it as much of this season, in my honest opinion, is that CJ Carr has evolved as the season has progressed and to the point where they don't need to play that way to win, but they still can. And that makes them, again, very, very dangerous because the best teams in a modern world of the extended college football playoff are the teams that have multiple ways to win. We saw this with Ohio State last year. They can win a shootout with all their firepower. They can win a defensive slugfest like we saw in different games for the Ohio State Buckeyes. That we've seen this year, same thing for Ohio State. Right now look like easily the best team in college football. If you have multiple ways to win and a quarterback that has the ability to take over a game, you can go on a serious run. Now look, you have a young quarterback, you have any quarterback, there's going to be some duds. Do you have the talent, the coaching, and the ability in those environments to find a way to come up with a big win? And the answer from Notre Dame undeniably was yes. And here's the beautiful part about it, and I think you kind of alluded to it. This wasn't some great comeback. This wasn't some back and forth game. Notre Dame took the lead late in the first half, and they never relinquished. They never trailed in the second half, right? Now, look, it was close. It was competitive, and then it became a two-score game, later in the second half. But the reality was it wasn't like this was a back and forth crazy game, in terms of for 4 quarters, and it was just chaos. And, just so happened that Notre Dame found the way to win at the end, kind of like how Notre Dame lost against Texas A&M. That's kind of a good comparison. The reality is Notre Dame was the better team throughout. They were the better team, despite their sloppiness, despite their poor quarterback play, right? Despite the fact they played basically an 80% game, they were a better team. And that makes them, again, a very serious force. Teams that on an off day that can still win and win pseudo-decisively, like we saw from the Fighting Irish, they are contenders. I know the 2 losses and I know the strength of schedule. All those people can talk about that. Fine. I'll let all those guys deal with that. But I'm just looking at the product on the field. And right now, the way the Fighting Irish are playing, I don't know if there's a team in college football that wants to play them or is seriously thinking it's an easy victory. This is a squad that can go up against anybody and beat you a bunch of different ways. And I think they're in a great position the rest of the year.